blue light from my dual monitor setup always leaves a dry, gritty itch in my eyes. By 2 a.m., a professional hazard of digital asset archiving, my office is a study in sterile, calculated logic. The low hum of the server rack under the desk, the rhythmic ticking of a cooling fan, and a half-empty mug of coffee that had long since developed a thin, oily film. I was running a routine indexing script for a legacy database. Mindless work that usually required nothing more than occasional oversight to ensure the metadata tags aligned. My job is to categorize the footprints people leave behind, ensuring every byte of data has a home, a name, and a verified origin. I noticed the entry during a standard sweep of the platform's dormant user blocks. It wasn't a glitch in the traditional sense. There was no corrupted code or broken link. It was simply a profile for a user named Elias Thorne. The contrast was immediate. In a world where every digital soul is tethered to 1,000 invisible strings, IP logs, purchase histories, cross-platform cookies. Elias Thorne was a void. The profile was sparse, featuring a high-resolution photo of a generic park bench and a bio that read only, "Waiting for the update." I checked the server logs expecting to find a test account or a bot. Instead, I found a timestamp from 1998, a full decade before this specific platform was even conceptualized. My ergonomic chair creaked as I leaned in, the cold air from the vent raising hair on my arms. Logically, it had to be a database migration error, a ghost in the machine. Yet, as I refreshed the page, the last active stated to just now, no one exists without a footprint, but Elias Thorne was standing right there in the data. Invisible and impossible. I spent the next 3 hours scouring the back-end architecture for a logical explanation. But the Elias Thorne profile remained an immovable anomaly. It wasn't until I pulled the original site documentation, a 400-page PDF of the platform's legacy terms of service and internal safety guidelines, that I found it. My eyes were burning, the blue light of the monitor making the text swim, but a single entry on page 312 froze my hand on the mouse. It wasn't highlighted or bolded. It sat in the same monotonous 10-point font as the clauses on data privacy and server maintenance. The rule stated, account status, unindexed, is reserved for system stability. Employees shall not attempt to verify or interact with unindexed users. Below it was a subclause that felt more like a warning than a policy. Interaction with unindexed data may result in permanent synchronization errors. I leaned back, the leather of my chair sticking to my skin. In any other context, a synchronization error meant a file didn't upload. Here, following a profile that hadn't existed until I looked at it, the word permanent carried a weight that made the dry air in the office feel heavy. I shouldn't have kept digging. A logical man would have flagged it as a system bug and gone home. But the last active timer was still ticking, a silent heartbeat in the code. I opened the platform's obscure user safety guide. A document usually reserved for high-level moderation, tucked between a paragraph on copyright infringement and another on account recovery, was a final chilling instruction. If an unindexed user appears in your local cache, do not look for the source. The source is already looking for you. I closed the browser, but the hum of the server rack suddenly sounded like a low, modulated whisper. I wasn't just observing a ghost in the machine anymore. I was following the map it had left for me. I decided to run a controlled trace, a logical countermeasure to prove the profile was just a caching error. I set up a packet sniffer and a geolocation script, expecting the data to point to a server in a different time zone. Instead, the ping returned a latency of less than 2 milliseconds. In networking terms, the signal wasn't coming from across the country. It was coming from inside my own subnet. I sat in the dark, the only light being the rhythmic pulsing of the router's LED, which flickered like a nervous eye every time the status on the Elias Thorne profile updated. My router blinked in perfect synchronization. I wasn't just watching a ghost, I was hosting it. The routine became a slow-motion car crash of digital evidence. Every night at 3:14 a.m., the exact time my automated backup starts, Elias would post a single, uncaptioned image. Monday was a grainy shot of the deli where I buy my lunch, taken from the perspective of the security camera I walk under every day. Tuesday was the lobby of my apartment building, the timestamp matching the moment I scanned my key fob. There were no people in the photos, just the empty spaces I had occupied hours before. A rational mind would call the police, but what was the crime? A non-existent user was posting public domain-style photos of public spaces. There was no threat, only a persistent, digital shadowing. By Friday, the isolation of my apartment felt like a pressure cooker. I stopped leaving the house, opting to monitor the profile with the intensity of a hawk. I had triple-checked my firewall, encrypted my local drives, and even physically disconnected my webcam. Yet, the updates continued with surgical precision. At 3:14 a.m., the new post appeared. It was a photo of my front door, taken from the hallway. The wood grain was sharp, the brass of the deadbolt gleaming under the flickering hallway light. I didn't breathe. I walked to my door and peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty, the air silent and still. I looked back at the monitor. A new comment had appeared under the photo of my door, posted by Elias. I am just waiting for the update to finish. Panic is a biological response, but logic is a digital one. I forced my breathing to level out, my fingers hovering over the mechanical keyboard. I wasn't going to be the stupid protagonist of some urban legend. I was going to use the system's own architecture against it. The user safety guide had a very specific protocol for malicious actors. The hard block in the platform's code. A hard block doesn't just hide a user, it severs the handshake between the local client and the server-side database for that specific UID. It is the digital equivalent of a restraining order. I opened the console, typed in the UID for Elias Thorne, and executed the command. The screen flickered once, and the profile vanished. User not found. I leaned back, a cold sweat cooling on my forehead. I had followed the rules. I had used the tools provided by the bureaucratic trap itself to secure my environment. But as I sat there, the silence of the apartment began to feel heavy, like the atmospheric pressure was rising. I checked my router. The lead was no longer pulsing in sync. It was glowing a steady, angry red. I refreshed my own profile page, just to see something familiar. My heart skipped. My profile picture was gone. My bio was empty. My join date had been reset to 1998. I scrambled to the legacy terms of service PDF, my mouse clicks sounding like gunshots in the quiet room. I searched for block functionality. I found the loophole in a tiny footnote on page 398. The block function restricts the administrator's view of the unindexed entity to prevent further synchronization errors. It does not restrict the entity's view of the administrator. The realization hit me like a physical blow. By blocking Elias, I hadn't made him go away. I had simply blinded myself to him. I was still being watched, but now I had no way to track the observer. The logical breach wasn't his, it was mine. I had followed the instruction to block the source, but I had failed to understand that in this system, visibility is a two-way street. I heard a soft notification sound, not from my computer, but from the phone I had left on the kitchen counter. I walked over, my legs feeling like lead. A new notification on my own lock screen read, "Elias Thorne has tagged you in a photo." I didn't want to look, but the logic of the trap demanded it. It was a photo of me, right now, standing in the kitchen, viewed from the perspective of the blank, dark screen of my own monitor in the other room. He wasn't in the house. He was the house. The screen on my monitor didn't just go dark. It became a mirror, reflecting the hollowed-out version of the man I used to be. I didn't scream. I didn't run. Logic had already dictated the outcome. If the system recognizes you as unindexed, you no longer possess the administrative privilege to exist in the physical world. I sat back down in my ergonomic chair, the hum of the server rack now sounding like a choir of white noise, welcoming me home. I opened the legacy terms of service one last time, my vision blurring as the pixels on the screen began to bleed into the air around me. On the final, unnumbered page, beneath a layer of corrupted metadata, I found the true definition of a synchronization error. It wasn't a failure of data, it was a transfer of state. The update is complete when the observer and the observed are indistinguishable. I looked at my hands. They were translucent, shimmering with the same dry blue light as the monitors. I wasn't a person sitting in a room anymore. I was a collection of tags and timestamps, a legacy file being compressed into the void. I left the house today, or at least, the data suggests I did. I walked past the deli, past the lobby, and stood for a moment on that generic park bench from the profile photo. People walked through me like static. I am the shadow in the security footage, the glitch in the sensor, the reason your router blinks in the middle of the night for no reason. I found the old HOA packet in my mother's desk before I faded completely. The rule's yellowed and waiting. The rule is still there. Don't let the midnight salesman in. But the salesman isn't at the door anymore. He's in your feed. He's in your cache. And right now, as you read this, he is waiting for your update to finish.